Calum Nix always thought there were worse jobs than being a diplomat in Aurorium, like being a professional rat wrangler on the lower levels. But today, as he stood before the so-called alien gods, he was revising his list. Aurorium, the Dyson Sphere city that was humanity's shining jewel and blinding architectural migraine wrapped in one, stretched beyond imagination. A testament to human ingenuity, if you could call a mishmash of stolen alien tech and jury-rigged human engineering ingenuity. The gods, or rather the godly contingent of what looked like an interstellar freak show, loomed over Calum in a display of their divine inferiority complex. Their leader, an entity with too many eyes and not enough patience, watched him with the kind of curiosity usually reserved for bacteria under a microscope. "I hear you demand worship," Calum said, cutting right to the chase. He had learned long ago that small talk with cosmic beings was like trying to explain quantum mechanics to a goldfish. The lead god, whom the humans dubbed Eyeball, probably because Shifty the Creep was already taken by a questionable bar owner in Sector 7, shifted its gaze across the room. "Your kind will worship us," it intoned, voice dripping with the kind of authority that would make a planetary governor blush. Calum scratched at the back of his neck. "See, that's problematic for us. We humans have a hard time with the idea of kneeling to anything. We got rid of kings a couple of millennia ago, and that was a messy business. We've got commitment issues, you know." Eyeball didn't seem to appreciate the joke. Maybe humor was lost on them, or maybe they just had the emotional range of a teaspoon. The other gods, an assembly of bizarre creatures that looked like someone had raided an intergalactic zoo, remained silent. Their silence was oppressive, like the lingering smell of burnt toast. Calum continued, "Look, I'm sure you're very important in the grand scheme of things, but why do you need us to worship you? You've got your fan club, I assume." Another god, this one resembling a sentient pile of moss with delusions of grandeur, spoke up, voice like gravel rolling downhill. "Worship brings order. Order brings peace. Peace is prosperity." "Yeah, we've heard that line before," Calum responded, leaning against the transparent barrier separating him from certain death by divine smiting. Not that the gods seemed quite capable of smiting without a prolonged committee meeting. "But our version of order involves less bowing and more, you know, not being subjugated." Eyeball blinked in a sequence that probably meant something significant. Maybe it was Morse code for "your defiance amuses me," or perhaps "you're about to have a very bad day." Hard to tell with these cosmic enigmas. The chamber they occupied was something between a cathedral and a spaceship's cargo bay. It was vast, echoing with possibilities and the faint hum of power. The human representatives stood at one end, their clothes a hodgepodge of diplomatic attire and survival gear, because you never knew when fashion might need to be jettisoned for a quick escape. Calum's assistant, a wiry young woman named Kira, sidled up to him. "They're not buying it, are they?" "Not a chance," Calum replied, his voice a low murmur. "But at least they haven't vaporized us." "Yet," Kira added helpfully, her expression a mix of wry amusement and resignation. There was something about negotiating with creatures that could turn you into a stain on the floor with a thought that kept you grounded, or perhaps flattened. Eyeball shifted again, its many irises narrowing. "You seek to defy us," Calum shrugged, a casual gesture that was as much bluff as it was bravado. "It's more like we're seeking to, not bend the knee. It's kind of our thing." There was a pause, the kind of uncomfortable silence that usually preceded a screaming match or, in this case, intergalactic conflict. "Perhaps you misunderstand," Eyeball said, its voice oozing condescension like oil from a busted engine. "Your species is but a child in the cosmos. You require guidance. We like to think of ourselves as rebellious teenagers," Calum countered. "And if history's taught us anything, it's that teenagers make terrible followers." Kira snorted quietly beside him, her gaze fixed on the gods with the kind of intensity usually reserved for staring contests. The godly delegation seemed to confer silently, a silent communion of the weird and wonderful. Then Eyeball spoke again. "We shall give you time to reconsider." Calem's skin prickled with a sensation that was neither fear nor excitement but a disconcerting combination of both. "How generous of you," he said. "I'm sure the committee back home will be thrilled with the homework assignment." With that, the gods retreated, their departure soundless but heavy with the weight of their expectations. Kira turned to Calem, eyebrows raised. "Think they'll come back with a better offer?" "I doubt it," Calem replied, sighing. Divine beings don't haggle, especially when they're holding all the cards. As they left the chamber, the weight of impending doom hung over Calem like a particularly inept cloud of locusts, bumbling along but ever present. "So, what's the plan?" Kira asked as they walked the labyrinthine corridors of Aurorium. It was a city designed by committee, with all the charm of a malfunctioning vending machine. "We stall. We negotiate. We try not to get obliterated," Calem answered. "And if that fails, we distract them with a game of interstellar charades." Kira shook her head. "You're insane." "That's what makes me good at this," Calem said with a grin. "Besides, I've always wanted to know if gods have a sense of humor." As they moved deeper into the heart of Aurorium, past the flickering lights and the ever-present hum of the sphere systems, Calem couldn't shake the feeling that humanity was balancing on the edge of a blade. It was a precarious position, but then, humans had always been fond of playing with sharp objects. Back in the central command room, a group of human leaders awaited them. The room was a blend of chaos and organization, a testament to humanity's uncanny ability to thrive amidst disorder. A holographic display flickered above them, showing the movements of the alien god's fleet, an impressive display of cosmic armament that dwarfed anything humanity had ever cobbled together. "So how'd it go?" asked General Tully, a bear of a man with the disposition of a grizzly who'd been woken up too early. "They want us to worship them," Calem said, dropping into a chair with all the grace of a meteor hitting a planet. "And they're not big on negotiating," Tully grunted, a sound that could mean anything from displeasure to indigestion. "Figures. What's our next move?" asked Dr. Ilara Knox, the chief scientist who had the perpetually frazzled look of someone who'd spent too long trying to decode alien tech with a spanner and a prayer. "We stall," Calem replied, "and hope they get bored before deciding to pull the plug on our little ant farm." "You think they will?" Knox asked, skepticism heavy in her voice. "No idea," Calem admitted. "But I can promise you this much. We won't be making any golden statues anytime soon." The room went silent, the weight of their predicament pressing down on them. It was the kind of silence that filled the void between hope and despair, where only the bravest or the most foolish dared to tread. "Well," Tully said at last, "if we're going down, we might as well give him hell." Calem couldn't help but smile at that, a grim, resigned grin. "Damn right," he said. "After all, if we're going to be obliterated by divine beings, we might as well make it memorable." And with that, the meeting dissolved into discussions of strategy, contingencies, and the kind of wild ideas that only desperate times could inspire. They were human, after all. And if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was surviving the impossible. As Calem left the command room, the shadows lengthening around him, he couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get a whole lot worse before they got better. But then, in a universe ruled by alien gods who demanded worship like pets demanded belly rubs, what was a little existential crisis among friends? Back in his quarters, Calem gazed out at the sprawling city of Aurorium, a chaotic masterpiece of human persistence. The lights twinkled like stars trapped in glass, and for a moment he felt a pang of something resembling hope. Humanity had faced extinction before, from threats internal and external, and emerged blooded but unbroken. "Maybe this time won't be any different," he muttered to himself, the words lost to the void. The universe was vast and indifferent, a place where gods and mortals played their endless games. But as long as there was a chance, however slim, Calem knew they would fight. Because that's what humans did best. They defied the odds, laughed in the face of doom, and flipped the universe the proverbial bird. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. The room was a gray box, which was appropriate given that Calum felt like his entire life had been boxed into a corner. He sat at a table that lacked any distinguishing features except the sticky residue of 1,000 diplomatic lunches gone wrong. Across from him, Eyeball, or at least a holographic projection of Eyeball, hovered in the air, its multiple irises rotating with the grace of a malfunctioning merry-go-round. "Welcome back to the realm of the mortals," Calum began, flashing a smile that was more teeth than warmth. "Shall we dive into today's existential crisis?" Eyeball blinked, a ripple passing through its many eyes like a wave of disappointment. "We are most patient," Calum nix, "yet even cosmic patience has limits." Calum leaned back in his chair, loosening the knot of his noose-like tie. "So, about your demands, worship, submission, the whole 9 yards, what's really in it for us? Aside from the chance to be living doormats for cosmic deities, of course." A pause, pregnant with the kind of anticipation usually reserved for bad news. "Order and protection," Eyeball declared, its voice as oily as a greased politician. "Without us, your species risks annihilation, not from us but from the universe." "Ah, the old 'we're saving you from the big bad universe' pitch," Calum replied. "Classic, but we've been doing okay without parental supervision for a while now." "Sure, we've had our hiccups, but who hasn't?" Eyeball's projection seemed to shimmer, a flicker of irritation perhaps, though it was hard to anthropomorphize a disco ball with a god complex. "Your resilience is noted. But you are but children in the cosmic expanse." "If we're children, we're the sort who found the liquor cabinet," Calum quipped, glancing over at Kira, who stood against the far wall, arms crossed like a bouncer at a particularly exclusive club. "And frankly, we like the taste." Kira snorted, a sound that managed to express both amusement and a hint of derision. "So what's the catch?" "There's always a catch." Eyeball blinked or maybe winked, hard to tell with all those eyes. "Your compliance ensures your safety. Your defiance invites chaos." "Chaos, huh? Sounds like a family reunion," Calum said, tapping his fingers on the table, the rhythm a comforting distraction from the looming threat of obliteration. "But let's say we decide to play along. What does worship even look like on a practical level?" "Weekly sermons, sacrificial lambs, bake sales. The details are for you to determine," Eyeball stated, its tone as flat as a sheet of titanium. "We require only loyalty and reverence." "Reverence isn't really in our wheelhouse," Calum said, leaning forward, his elbows on the table. "We're more into irreverence. It's a human thing, call it cultural heritage." As Eyeball's projection flickered, Kira piped up. "You say loyalty brings order, but have you seen us? We struggled to organize lunch." The projection didn't react, likely because humor was as alien to it as humility. "Consider our offer. We will await your response." With that, Eyeball's image vanished, leaving behind an empty silence that thickened the air like bad cologne. Calum exhaled through his nose, a slow hiss of frustration. "This isn't going well," Kira remarked, her voice the verbal equivalent of a shrug. "Understatement of the century," Calum replied, running a hand through his hair, already mussed by stress and existential dread. "We're dealing with gods who have all the charm of a brick through a window. And we're the window." As they left the room, the corridor outside was alive with the buzz of humanity doing what it did best, muddling through chaos with the grace of a drunk attempting the cha-cha. The lights overhead flickered, an intermittent reminder of the city's strained systems, strained like an overworked bureaucrat eyeing early retirement. "We need to dig deeper," Calum said, his tone serious despite the quirk of his lips that suggested a joke was brewing. "Find leverage, something they want more than our adoration." Kira nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I'll start poking around. Maybe there's something in our archives about dealing with megalomaniac deities." "You do that," Calum replied, slapping her on the shoulder. "If you find anything, let me know. Preferably before they decide we're not worth the cosmic utility bill." As Kira peeled away to dive into the bowels of data storage, a voice called out from behind. "Calum, got a minute?" Turning, Calum found himself face to face with Roderick Voss, the city's chief engineer, a man who looked like he could bench press a starship. His coveralls were stained with the kind of grease that had never seen the inside of a kitchen, and his eyes had the wild glint of someone who regularly flirted with catastrophic failure. "Voss, if it's about the coffee machines again, I swear." "Not this time," Voss interrupted, waving a hand dismissively. "We've got bigger fish to fry, or rather, bigger anomalies. Strange power fluctuations throughout the sphere. Stuff's going haywire, and I'm pretty sure it's not because Jenkins blew another fuse." "Could it be the gods?" Calum asked, already knowing the answer but hoping against hope for a different one. Voss shrugged, a movement both casual and foreboding. "If it is, they're playing with us. Might be a warning. Might be them getting trigger-happy with our systems." "Fantastic," Calum muttered, resisting the urge to bang his head against the nearest wall. "Let's add technological sabotage to our list of crises." "Welcome to the club," Voss said, grinning like a man who'd long since accepted the universe had it out for him. "I'll keep you posted if things get worse, which they will." Calum nodded, his mind already spinning with possibilities and the looming sense of doom that had taken up residence like an unwanted houseguest. "Thanks, Voss. Keep me in the loop." As Voss turned to leave, Calum felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him like a heavy, unwelcome blanket. The gods were toying with them, their patience as thin as the promises of politicians. And yet, despite the pressure, Calum couldn't help but feel a spark of defiance. Humanity had faced worse odds, granted, perhaps not quite this celestial, but they'd always found a way to come out swinging. It was that same stubborn streak that had driven them to build Aurorium in the first place, a shining testament to human ingenuity and the kind of hubris that made one want to take a running leap at the moon. Back at his office, Calum found himself staring out at the cityscape, the lights twinkling like a million tiny rebellions against the darkness. The gods wanted worship, but what they didn't understand was that for humans, the act of defiance was its own form of faith. Faith in themselves, in their ability to carve out a niche in a universe that seemed hell-bent on swallowing them whole. "Okay, let's see what we can do with this mess," Calum murmured to himself, settling into the chair behind his desk. There was work to be done, alliances to forge, and a desperate need to find something, anything, that could tip the balance in their favor. The door slid open and Kira walked in, a data pad in her hand and a glint in her eye that spoke of fresh discoveries. "You might want to see this," she said, thrusting the pad at him. Calum took it, skimming the contents. "What am I looking at?" "Records from the early construction of Aurorium," Kira replied, taking a seat opposite him. "Back then there were rumors of entities contacting the builders, offering guidance." Calum raised an eyebrow. "Guidance or coercion? Depends on who you ask," Kira said, leaning back in her chair. "But there are mentions of something big buried deep within the sphere. Some kind of failsafe." "Failsafe," Calum echoed, the word rolling off his tongue with the weight of potential salvation. "You think it's connected to our godly friends?" "Could be," Kira said, her expression serious. "If anyone was going to hide a doomsday device or a bargaining chip, it'd be them." Calum considered the implications, the gears of his mind turning with the kind of reckless speed that suggested either genius or imminent disaster. "If we can find it, it might give us leverage. Something to bring to the table." "It's a long shot," Kira warned, though there was a note of excitement in her voice, the thrill of the hunt mingling with the cold dread of what they might uncover. "Long shots are all we've got," Calum replied, determination hardening his features. "Get a team together. We'll start digging, literally, if we have to." Kira nodded, already making notes on her data pad. "I'll get right on it." As she left, Calum allowed himself a shaky exhale. Maybe they had a chance after all, even if it was the kind of chance that came with a side order of impending doom. He rose from his chair, moving to the window once more. The city stretched out before him, a testament to human tenacity and the occasional miracle. They'd defied odds before, and they'd do it again, with or without divine intervention. Outside, the lights of Aurorium continued to blaze defiantly against the night, a stubborn beacon in the darkness. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Calum allowed himself a glimmer of hope, even as he prepared to dive headlong into the depths of the unknown. Because when faced with the choice between worshipping gods and standing tall in the face of obliteration, there was really only one option for humanity: to fight, to survive, and most importantly, to never, ever kneel. Calum Nix was deeply familiar with the sensation of his life unraveling faster than a cheap sweater. The damn cosmic deities were turning the screws, and his patience was almost as thin as the excuse for coffee they served in the break room. Still, he had a job to do: find out how to bargain with omnipotent beings who had the same bedside manner as a malfunctioning toaster. His first stop was the Science Hall, a building that had seen better days, not unlike the rest of Aurorium. The place was a labyrinth of corridors that smelled of burnt experiments and stale coffee, with scientists bustling around like ants on methamphetamines. If anyone could convert cosmic gibberish into something useful, it was this lot, provided they'd had their caffeine fix. He found Dr. Leora Asteris in her lab, elbow deep in what looked suspiciously like the leftovers of a bad science fair project. "Doctor." "Asteris," Calum greeted, trying not to inhale. "Need your brain for a bit. Make it quick," she replied, wrenching a pair of goggles from her brow and smearing grease across her forehead in the process. "These molecules aren't going to rip themselves apart. Got yourselves a cosmic ultimatum," Calum said, leaning against the doorway like he owned the place. "Worship or get wiped." "I'm guessing you've got a plan that doesn't involve us groveling like extras in a bad space opera," Leora snorted, a sharp sound that cut through the lab's ambient chaos like a knife. "You think celestial entities came with a user manual? We're talking about beings who invented quantum mechanics to keep us on our toes." "Come on, Leora. I need something. A way to fake it till we make it, or better yet, make them back off." She sighed, half resignation, half irritation. "We could try tuning into their frequency, send a few subliminal messages their way, but it's a long shot." "Perfect," Calum deadpanned, mentally filing it under last hope. "Anything else? Pray they're not as omniscient as the legends say." "If they are, we're just ants in their cosmic picnic. Appreciate the pep talk," Calum said with a mock salute. "I'll let you get back to your molecular dissection or whatever." He left the lab, determined to find something more promising than hoping the gods had an off day. Next stop, the philosophy wing, where thinkers and ponderers gathered to discuss the mysteries of the universe. Or at least sound like they knew what they were doing. The place was no less chaotic than the Science Hall, albeit quieter, with its occupants more prone to stroking their chins than blowing things up. Calum spotted Dr. Parth Vellum, a man whose beard and opinions both took up more space than was probably healthy. "Parth," Calum greeted, interrupting a heated debate about the nature of reality that would have bored him to tears if he'd had time for that. "Ah, Calum," Parth responded, his voice as smooth as aged whiskey. "What brings you to our corner of existential dread?" "Need your take on our cosmic overlords," Calum said. "How do we convince them to let us keep existing without turning us into their personal fan club?" Parth leaned back in his chair, the kind of man who could make leisure look like hard work. "You could argue that the mere act of existence is an act of worship. Every breath we take, every move we make, a tribute to the cosmos they represent." Calum blinked. "You want me to tell them we're worshipping by living?" "Sounds like the setup to a bad joke." "Ah, but it's the truth," Parth said, eyes twinkling with the kind of mischief that came from too much thinking and not enough doing. "And truth, my friend, is sometimes the only weapon we have." "Noted," Calum replied, filing this one under desperate gambits. "I'll keep that in mind when I'm negotiating with the giant eyeball." As he left the philosophy wing, A flicker of lights overhead reminded him of the other pressing issue. The gods were testing their patience by toying with Aurorium's power grid. The city's infrastructure was on the verge of a nervous breakdown, and all they could do was slap band-aids on bullet wounds. His comm buzzed as Kira's voice came through, sharp as ever. "Calum, where are you? We've got bigger problems." "On my way to engineering," he replied, already picking up the pace. "Tell me it's not more blackouts." "Try rolling brownouts," Kira retorted, her tone acidic enough to pickle an egg. "If this keeps up, we'll be living in the Dark Ages." "Great," Calum muttered, not breaking stride. "Just what we needed, and homage to humanity's past mistakes." He arrived at engineering to find Voss in the middle of directing a team of frazzled technicians. "Voss, I hear the gods are messing with our lights now." The chief engineer looked up, wiping his hands on his stained coveralls. "Yeah, and if we don't figure this out soon, we might as well start selling candles." "Any bright ideas?" Calum asked, regretting the pun the moment it left his mouth. Voss shrugged, his expression suggesting he had long ago run out of optimism and was now fueled solely by spite. "We're trying to stabilize the grid, but it's like plugging holes in a dam with our fingers." "So we're screwed," Calum summarized, earning a nod from Voss. "Pretty much, but hey, at least we're all going down together." "Sounds cozy," Calum said, resisting the urge to punch a wall. "Keep me posted on the descent into chaos." As he walked away, Calum couldn't shake the feeling that they were all just passengers on a sinking ship, and the crew had decided to take a nap. But there had to be something, some way to turn this mess to their advantage. His thoughts were interrupted by Kira, who caught up to him with a grim expression. "I've been digging through the archives," she said, holding up her data pad like it was a holy relic. "Found something interesting. Interesting as in we're about to die, or we might survive this. Interesting as in we might have a bargaining chip," Kira replied, her eyes glinting with the kind of defiance that was as infectious as it was reckless. "Spill," Calum said, gesturing for her to follow as they headed down the corridor. "There's an old record from when Aurorium was first constructed," Kira explained. "Mentions of a hidden power source, something big and potentially dangerous." "Potentially dangerous sounds like our kind of party," Calum commented, scanning the pad. "You think the gods know about this? If they do, they haven't shown their hand yet." "But it could be why they are here." Calum considered the implications, the weight of it pressing down on him like an anvil. "If we can find it, we might have something to negotiate with. Assuming we don't blow ourselves up in the process," Kira added, ever the voice of caution wrapped in sarcasm. "Details, details," Calum waved off her concern. "Get a team together. We're going treasure hunting." As Kira moved to gather their ragtag team of adventurers, Calum felt a flicker of hope. It was the kind that came with a side of danger, like jumping out of a plane and hoping the parachute worked. They made their way down to the lower levels of Aurorium, the parts of the city where the lights flickered more ominously, and the air had the distinct tang of desperation. The corridors were narrower here, the walls lined with conduits and cables, the veins and arteries of their dying beast of a city. "How deep do you think this thing is buried?" Calum asked, ducking under a low-hanging pipe. "Deep enough that nobody stumbled on it by accident," Kira replied, consulting her map with the kind of focus usually reserved for bomb defusal. "Or maybe they did and just didn't live to tell the tale," Calum said cheerfully, earning a glare from Kira that could have melted steel. "Next time, remind me not to bring you along for motivational speeches." "Hey, I'm just here for my charming personality." They rounded a corner to find the rest of their team, a motley crew of engineers and scientists, all looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Calum couldn't blame them. This was the kind of job that had bad idea written all over it in neon. "All right, folks," he addressed them, clapping his hands together. "We're looking for a hidden power source. Think of it as a scavenger hunt, but with more at stake than a gold star." One of the engineers, a wiry woman named Lynn, raised an eyebrow. "And by more at stake, you mean our lives?" "Exactly," Calum confirmed, grinning like a madman. Now let's get to it. They spread out, fanning through the corridors and storage rooms like detectives in a crime scene, each hoping to find something that wouldn't kill them instantly. The air was charged with tension, the kind that made your hair stand on end and your heart race like you were being chased by a particularly persistent tax collector. It wasn't long before Kira called out, her voice echoing down the corridor. "Got something." Calum hurried over, finding her, and the others gathered around a sealed hatchway. It looked old, older than the rest of the structure, with markings that suggested it hadn't been opened in a very long time. "Well, that's not ominous at all," Calum said, examining the markings. "Can we get it open?" Lynn, who had a knack for getting into places she wasn't supposed to, stepped forward with a toolkit. "Give me a minute." As she worked, the others stood back, watching with a mix of anticipation and dread. If this was their bargaining chip, it was either going to save them or be the death of them. "Got it," Lynn announced, with a triumphant click as the hatch unsealed, revealing a dark passage leading further into the depths of Aurorium. Calum peered into the darkness, wondering if this was the part where they all got swallowed whole. "Guess there's only one way to find out what's down there." "You first," Kira quipped, nudging him toward the opening with a smirk that was equal parts challenge and mischief. "Why am I not surprised?" Calum muttered, taking a deep breath before stepping into the unknown, the shadows closing around him like a shroud. As they descended into the hidden chamber, the air grew colder, the walls damp with condensation, the echoes of their footsteps bouncing off the stone like ghosts of the past. Whatever lay ahead was a mystery, but it was one they had to unravel if they wanted any chance of survival. And as Calum led the way, he couldn't help but think that for all the gods' power, it was humanity's tenacity and refusal to kneel that would make the difference in the end. Because sometimes, the best way to fight the dark was to bring your own light. Calum stared into the shadowy maw, the opening gaping like the mouth of some cosmic beast. "This has bad idea written all over it," he murmured, stepping into the chilly darkness. His footsteps echoed like a bad omen, each one a reminder of just how ill-advised this little adventure was. Kira followed close behind, her data pad casting a dim glow that did a poor job of warding off the gloom. "We've handled worse," she said, a smirk audible in her voice, even if her expression was hidden by the shadows. "Yeah, like that time we accidentally triggered an evacuation alarm in the science hall and got locked in the decontamination chamber for 2 hours. Fun times." "Hey, that was your idea," Kira shot back. "And we've still got those lovely radiation burns to show for it." "Details, details," Calum parried, as they continued deeper into the passage. "At least we lived to regret it." Their banter was a thin veneer over the tension that coiled around them like a live wire. Each step they took seemed to draw them further from the relatively safe chaos of Aurorium, and closer to the heart of whatever ancient secret the city had been hiding. The rest of the team moved with the cautious enthusiasm of people who had been promised either a spectacular discovery or a spectacular death. Lynn led the way, her toolkit clanking like a doom bell with each step, while the others trailed behind, murmuring nervously amongst themselves. The corridor eventually opened into a cavernous chamber that was almost cathedral-like in its vastness. Except, devoid of any reverent charm and more like a tomb waiting to swallow them whole. "Holy hell," Kira muttered, her voice bouncing off the walls in a mocking chorus. "This is it." Calum glanced around, taking in the massive machinery that sprawled across the room like some intricate ancient beast frozen mid-roar. "If by it you mean the potential reason for our imminent annihilation, yeah, looks like it." Lynn approached the nearest console, brushing dust from its surface. "Old tech," she noted, not bothering to hide her disdain. "About as user-friendly as a porcupine in a clown suit." "Can you make it work?" Calum asked, eyeing the thing like it might burst into flames on a whim. Lynn shrugged, cracking her knuckles. "I can try." "Just don't blame me if we blow up." "Wouldn't dream of it," Calum said, stepping back to give her room to work her magic, or whatever passed for it in this cosmic circus. While Lynn fiddled with the controls, Calum and Kira prowled the chamber, trying to make sense of the machinery. It was an eclectic mix of the ancient and the bizarre, like the worst kind of steampunk fever dream. "Think this is what the gods are after?" Kira asked, glancing at a console that appeared to be humming softly, like a very large, very dangerous cat. "Could be. Or they just think it's an excellent conversation piece," Calum replied. "Might explain why they're so keen on pressing all our buttons." Kira snorted. "Guess we're about to find out." Lynn cursed from where she was hunched over the controls, the glow from the console reflecting off her focused expression. "Got something, but it's not exactly friendly." "Friendly's overrated," Calum quipped, sidling up to peer over her shoulder. "What are we dealing with?" "Looks like a fail-safe system. Designed to power down the entire city if something goes wrong." "Power down or blow up?" Kira asked, ever the optimist. Lynn shot her a look. "Depends how you define wrong. This thing could shut down everything, or it could trigger a meltdown that would make our brownouts look like a candle-lit dinner." "Great," Calum muttered. "So we're either solving our problems or turning Aurorium into a barbecue." Lynn didn't bother to dignify that with a response, her attention fixed on the console as she prodded at the keys like she was defusing a bomb. "If we can get it to cooperate, we could stabilize the power grid. Maybe even get the gods off our back. Unless they are the type to hold grudges," Calum said. "In which case we're probably going to need a bigger plan." The console beeped ominously and the lights flickered overhead like they had a sense of humor. Lynn leaned back, wiping sweat from her brow. "There. Should be enough to stabilize things, at least temporarily. And by temporarily you mean long enough for us to get out of here before it either fixes everything or kills us all." Calum gave her a thumbs up, stepping back to let her finish. "Good enough for me." As Lynn worked, Calum glanced around the chamber, the weight of their precarious situation settling in like an unwelcome guest. The gods had given them no manual, no guide to navigate the cosmic intricacies that threatened to unravel their existence. But here, standing on the precipice of annihilation, he felt a grim determination take root. If the celestial deities wanted to play games, then so be it. They'd play right back, and they'd do it with the reckless defiance that only humanity could muster. "All right," Lynn said, stepping away from the console. "We're live. Let's see if this ticks off the gods or buys us some peace." "Here's hoping for the latter," Kira said, crossing her fingers in a gesture that was half humor, half genuine plea. They turned to leave, but as they did, a low rumble echoed through the chamber, the machinery groaning like some ancient beast stirring from slumber. Calum's heart sank, a sinking feeling pooling in his gut. Lynn," he called over his shoulder. "I think your fix might have had some side effects." She spun around, eyes wide as the rumbling intensified, the vibrations rattling the very air around them. "Didn't touch anything I wasn't supposed to, I swear." The lights overhead flickered madly, plunging them into a strobe-lit frenzy that made it feel like they were in the galaxy's worst rave. Calum's mind raced, each second stretching into an eternity of impending doom. "Looks like we pissed off the wrong gods," Kira muttered, her tone a mix of frustration and resignation. "Or maybe they're just giving us a not-so-gentle nudge," Calum countered, trying to inject some levity into a situation that was rapidly spiraling out of control. The floor trembled beneath them and he staggered, barely managing to keep his footing. They needed to move, and fast. "Everyone out," Calum shouted, waving the team toward the exit. "We'll regroup outside and see if we can contain this thing." The team didn't need to be told twice, scrambling toward the corridor with all the urgency of people who'd just realized they were standing on a ticking time bomb. As they fled, Calum cast one last glance at the chamber, the machinery thrumming with a life of its own, like the heart of some deranged beast. Whatever they'd awoken, it was clearly not in a benevolent mood. They bolted down the corridor, the rumble of the machinery pursuing them like a hound from hell. Each step was a battle against the trembling floor, each breath a prayer that they'd make it out before everything went up in smoke. Finally, they burst back into the relative safety of Aurorium's lower levels, the door slamming shut behind them with a finality that spoke of containment or entrapment. Calum leaned against the wall, catching his breath, his heart hammering in his chest. They'd done it. Maybe not elegantly, and certainly not without consequences, but they'd done it. "Well, that was fun," Kira said, her voice laced with irony as she wiped sweat from her brow. "How's that bargaining chip looking now?" Calum ran a hand through his hair, a rueful grin tugging at his lips. "Like it's about to blow us all to hell if we're not careful." Lynn, who was busy checking her equipment, looked up with a wry smile. "And here I thought we were just going for a stroll. Can we at least keep it from getting any worse?" Calum asked, gesturing back toward the sealed chamber where their unintended chaos still simmered. "Maybe," Lynn replied, her tone thoughtful. "If we can stabilize the grid, we might buy ourselves some time. But we'll need to work fast." Calum nodded, the weight of their situation pressing down on him like a lead blanket. They had a chance, however slim, to avert disaster. But it would take everything they had, and maybe a few things they didn't. As the team regrouped, he caught Kira's eye, her expression a mirror of his own determination. "Guess we'd better get to work," she said, her eyes glinting with the kind of reckless energy that made you believe you could take on the universe and win. "Yeah," Calum agreed, his own resolve hardening like steel. "Let's make sure this is a story worth telling." And with that, they set to work, fighting against both the gods and their own limitations, determined to prove that when it came to survival, humanity wouldn't go down without a fight. Even if it meant rewriting the rules as they went. The universe must have been having a laugh at their expense. The gods, with all their dazzling cosmic power, had decided it was the perfect time to unleash a storm across the Dyson sphere. Of course, it wasn't your run-of-the-mill rain and lightning. It was more of an angry celestial hissy fit, the kind that threatened to tear apart the very fabric of their existence. Calum watched the skies darken from the safety of a cramped observation deck, the view distorting through the reinforced glass. Light flickered like a cosmic disco, and he couldn't help but wonder if the gods were just bored. Maybe they'd run out of planets to play with and decided to take their frustrations out on the nearest Dyson sphere. "Looks like the gods are having a tantrum," Kira quipped, glancing at her data pad, the screen awash in a dizzying array of red alerts. "Think they'll go to their room if we ask nicely. More like send us to ours," Calum muttered. In little cosmic bits. Lynn was crouched by a panel, her toolkit spilled across the floor like a mechanic's nightmare. "We might be screwed," she announced, voice devoid of the usual bravado. "Systems fried. I'm gonna need a miracle or a hell of a lot of duct tape." "Miracles are in short supply," Calum said. "And I don't fancy our chances with duct tape against the wrath of the gods." "Seconded," Kira added, her fingers dancing over the data pad with the urgency of a gambler on a losing streak. "We need a plan." Calum leaned against the wall, the vibrations from the storm coursing through his bones. "We stabilize the power grid, keep our heads down, and hope the gods find something else to amuse them." "Great plan," Kira said, sarcasm dripping from her words like acid. "And when do we get to the part where we don't die?" "That'd be the part where we don't screw up," Calum replied, though the irony wasn't lost on him. Outside, the storm raged, winds howling with a fury that made the structure creak ominously. It was a sound that gnawed at Calum's nerves, reminding him of the precariousness of their situation. They were ants at the mercy of giants, scurrying beneath cosmic boots poised to crush them. And then, because no day of impending doom was complete without a little betrayal, the comms crackled to life, a voice slicing through the static like a knife. "Calum, you there?" It was Dr. Leora Asteris, and her tone had the clipped efficiency of someone delivering bad news. "Unfortunately," Calum replied. "What's the verdict, Doc?" "We've got a problem," she said, not bothering with pleasantries. Someone on your team is feeding intel to the gods. Kira paused, her eyes narrowing. Intel? What the hell are they gonna do with our radio frequencies and old tech manuals? Build a Dyson sphere of their own? I don't know, Doctor, Astris replied. But they're getting information, and it's compromising our efforts to stabilize the grid. Calum's mind raced, suspicion blooming like a dark flower. Any idea who? Not yet, she replied. But the pattern's clear. Someone's been broadcasting data during peak storm activity. Calum's gaze swept over his team, taking in their faces. Lynn, focused and frazzled, Kira, wary and defiant. Could one of them be the leak? The thought twisted in his gut like a knife. Do you think it's someone here? Lynn asked, her voice tight with an edge of disbelief. We've been through too much together. That's what makes it effective, Calum said. We need to lock this down before the gods decide to smite us all. Trust issues on top of a god-sized temper tantrum, Kira mused, a dark chuckle escaping her lips. Just another day in paradise. First, we get the grid stable, Calum said, pushing aside the knot of anxiety coiling in his stomach. Then we deal with the leak, Doctor. Astris's voice crackled through again, urgency underscoring her words. Whatever you do, do it fast. The storm is intensifying and we won't last long against this kind of celestial temper. Copy that, Calum said, the weight of their predicament settling over him like a shroud. They were walking a razor's edge, one wrong step away from oblivion. Lynn returned to her work, tools clattering, her hands moving with a frenetic energy that spoke of both desperation and determination. Kira stood beside her, offering a running commentary that was equal parts encouragement and biting humor. Think the gods are watching us? Kira asked, glancing up as if expecting divine spectators. Judging our performance like some cosmic talent show. If they are, they're gonna need more popcorn, Lynn muttered, soldering iron in hand. And a hell of a lot more patience. Calum turned his attention to the data pad, scanning readouts and diagnostics that painted a grim picture. The storm showed no signs of abating, and the power grid was holding on by the thinnest of threads. If they didn't act quickly, everything would unravel, and Aurorium would be nothing more than space debris. How's it looking? Calum asked, knowing full well he wouldn't like the answer. We've got a few Iors tops, Kira replied. But it's gonna be like dancing on a knife's edge with both feet tied together. Comforting, Calum said, though he suspected she was overselling their chances. Lynn shot him a look, her brow furrowed with concentration. You know, if we survive this, I'm gonna need a vacation. Maybe a nice black hole to relax by. Sure, Calum replied, a half-smile tugging at his lips despite the gravity of their situation. We'll book a couple of sun loungers right by the event horizon. They worked on, each minute stretching into an eternity. Calum's mind was a hive of activity, thoughts buzzing with strategies and suspicions. The storm raged outside, a constant reminder of the gods' displeasure, but it was the betrayal within their ranks that gnawed at him most. Who could it be? And why? The question lingered like a shadow, casting doubt on every move they made. But as the Iors dragged on, there was no time to dwell on it. They were fighting for survival, racing against an unforgiving clock that ticked down toward their annihilation. Finally, as the storm showed the first signs of abating, Lynn let out a triumphant shout. I think we've got it. Calum and Kira hurried over, peering at the interface that now glowed with a steady, reassuring light. The grid's stabilizing, Lynn said, a note of disbelief in her voice. We might just live to see another day. Nice work, Calum said, the knot of tension in his chest loosening just a fraction. Now about that leak. The comms crackled back to life, Doctor, Astris's voice cutting through the static. We've isolated the signal. It's coming from inside your group. Shocking, Kira said, her voice dripping with irony. And here I was hoping it was just some cosmic interference. Calum frowned, his mind racing as he considered the possibilities. Trust was a fragile thing, and now it lay in tatters at their feet. Any idea who? He asked, though the question felt hollow. He didn't want to believe it, couldn't afford to, but the reality was staring him in the face. Working on it, Doctor, Astris replied. but we need to act fast. The storm's dying down, but if they strike again, we'll be ready, Calum said, resolve hardening in his chest like steel. Whoever it is, they won't get away with this. Kira glanced at him, her expression unreadable. We've got your back, Calum, she said, the words both a promise and a challenge. Let's find out who's been screwing with us. Yeah, Calum agreed, though the truth lay somewhere between a hope and a threat. The gods might have unleashed a storm, but it was the storm within their own ranks that truly threatened to tear them apart. As they gathered their equipment and prepared to confront the traitor, Calum couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the brink of something far more dangerous than anything the gods could throw at them. Betrayal was a bitter pill to swallow, but it was one they'd have to face if they were to survive the coming storm. Together, or not at all. Calum ground his teeth so hard he thought he might turn his jaw into a finely milled powder. Trust issues were an understatement. It was more like someone had handed him a trust bomb and told him to juggle it. With one last despairing look at the flickering storm outside, a cosmic sneeze with a grudge, he turned back to face the mess they were in. "All right, folks," he said, summoning every ounce of leadership he could muster for a squad that felt like it was held together with spit and betrayal. "We need to find our mole and fast." Kira raised an eyebrow, her lips twisting into a smirk. "You think whoever it is might just throw their hands up and confess? Do we get to offer them a prize for worst team spirit?" Lynn, still elbows deep in wires and circuitry, gave a snort. "If they are dumb enough to confess, they deserve the gods' wrath. Might even throw in a recommendation letter for divine retribution." "Helpful as always," Calum said dryly. He turned his attention back to the data pad, scrolling through alerts and notifications like a man possessed. "Let's split duties. Lynn, keep that grid steady. Kira, see if you can isolate the source of the leak." "I'll interrogate Eyeball." "Interrogate a hologram?" Kira asked, skepticism dripping from her words like an oil leak. "What are you gonna do, threaten to pull the plug?" Calum shrugged. "Worth a shot. Maybe Eyeball will have some cosmic clue hidden in its spectral glow." The room, a space that felt too much like a coffin for comfort, was quiet except for the persistent hum of machinery and the occasional crackle of static from the comms. It was a symphony of impending doom, the kind that really set the mood when you weren't busy contemplating oblivion. With a deep breath, Calum tapped a sequence on the holographic interface, summoning Eyeball to the fore. The hologram shimmered into existence, its multiple irises spinning lazily as if it could barely muster the energy to care. "Ah, Calum," it greeted, voice smooth and insouciant. "To what do I owe the pleasure of your increasingly desperate company?" Calum folded his arms, mustering a glare that could melt steel. "Cut the crap, Eyeball. We've got a leak, and I'm betting my last pair of clean socks that you know something about it." "Your sartorial sacrifices are noted," Eyeball replied, irises spinning faster. "But I'm afraid treachery amongst you delightful humans is beyond my purview." Kira, who had been hovering at Calum's shoulder, leaned in. "You sure about that? You cosmic types love to meddle." "Maybe you're just enjoying the show." Eyeball's irises whirled, resembling a pupil in a blender. "Enjoyment is subjective. My observation of your unfolding drama is purely incidental." "Great," Calum muttered. "A cosmic voyeur." Despite the hologram's nonchalance, a flicker of something caught Calum's attention. The irises had momentarily aligned in a pattern that seemed oddly familiar. An idea sparked in his mind, sharp enough to cut through the haze of frustration. He leaned forward, scrutinizing the holographic projection as if it held the secrets of the universe, and maybe it did. "Eyeball," he said slowly, "you've been monitoring the storm's fluctuations, right?" "Indeed," the holographic deity confirmed. "The god's tantrum is a fascinating study in cosmic tantrumology." Calum rolled his eyes. "Yeah, sure, fascinating, but can you pinpoint any anomalies, any shifts in the storm patterns that don't align with the god's usual theatrics?" Eyeball paused, its irises spinning with deliberation. There was an unusual fluctuation approximately 3 hours ago, a disruption in the storm's intensity. Kira's eyes widened. Could be a flaw if the gods' control isn't absolute. Then maybe, Calum continued, the threads of a plan weaving themselves together in his mind, we can exploit it. Cause a ripple in the storm, destabilize it from within. Lynn, who had been eavesdropping while pretending to focus on the grid, raised her head, skepticism etched in every line of her face. And how exactly do you plan on poking the gods in the eye without getting squashed like a bug? Calum grinned, the kind of grin that was more teeth than amusement. Simple. We give them a reason to lose focus, something big enough to make them blink. You're talking about a distraction, Kira said, catching on. But how do you distract a god? They've got universe-wide attention spans. That's where you come in, Calum said, pointing at the data pad. If we can fake a system's overload, something catastrophic, we might just cause enough of a blip in their cosmic radar to slip through, Lynn finished. She shook her head, letting out a breath that was part disbelief, part resignation. It's a long shot, but what the hell? Long shots and duct tape are the only things keeping us alive. Kira was already tapping furiously on her data pad, her fingers flying over the interface. I'll get to work on the false readings. We'll need to sync it with the storm's patterns, make it look like a genuine threat. Calum nodded, his mind racing with possibilities and pitfalls. They were standing on the precipice of disaster, but for the first time, it felt like they had a sliver of control. A sliver that could slice both ways, but hey, beggars, especially those staring down cosmic entities, couldn't be choosers. As they set to work, the storm outside continued to rage. It was a monstrous, living thing, clawing at the Dyson sphere with a fury that promised nothing but destruction. But here, in their little bubble of defiance, a plan was forming. A plan that might just tip the scales in their favor if they had luck, and maybe a little divine indifference on their side. It wasn't long before Kira had the false data spikes programmed, syncing them to the fluctuations in the storm. Lynn had rigged the system to transmit the overload signal at just the right moment, a precarious dance on the edge of catastrophe. Ready as we'll ever be, Kira said, handing the data pad to Calum. Just remember, if this blows up in our faces, I'm haunting you first. Noted, Calum replied, adjusting the settings with a precision born of desperation. Let's light the fuse and see if we can't make those gods blink. With a collective breath, they initiated the sequence. The false overload signal pulsed through the system, a digital heartbeat that echoed their audacity. Outside, the storm shuddered, almost as if sensing the trickery at play. Here goes nothing, Lynn murmured, her voice barely audible over the cacophony of alarms and warnings that filled the air. Calum watched the data streams with a tension that coiled in his gut like a living thing. The storm's intensity wavered, a subtle shift that might have been wishful thinking or the first sign of success. Eyeball, still hovering with its dispassionate gaze, observed the unfolding chaos. Your gamble is intriguing, it commented, a hint of amusement threading its tone. A dance with fate, an embrace of uncertainty. More like a dance with death, Kira muttered, keeping her eyes glued to the data pad. But hey, at least we're leading. As the minutes ticked by, the plan seemed to hold. The storm continued its assault, but the patterns were erratic, a falter in the divine choreography that spoke of distraction. For the first time, it felt like they had a chance, a slim, improbable chance to survive. The tension in the room was a living entity, threading through every breath, every heartbeat. Calum could feel it in the air, a mix of hope and dread colliding in a maelstrom of potential. They were on the cusp of something monumental, something that could tip the scales in their favor. And then, because cosmic irony was a bitch, the comms crackled to life again. Doctor, Astras's voice cut through the static, urgent and unyielding. Calum, the storm's changing. Whatever you're doing, it's working, but you need to get out of there, now. Calum exchanged a look with Kira and Lynn, a silent understanding passing between them. They were in deep and there was no turning back. But the stakes had never been higher and the odds had never been more daunting. All right, Calum said, his voice steady despite the chaos. We pull back, regroup, and see if we can turn this to our advantage. Kira flipped her data pad closed with a snap. And find our mole while we're at it. I've got a few choice words for whoever's been screwing us over. Lynn stood, dusting off her hands with a grim determination. Let's hope we get the chance. I'm not ready to be cosmic toast just yet. They gathered their gear, moving with a purpose that belied the chaos swirling around them. The storm outside was a tempest of power and fury, but within their ranks, a flicker of hope had ignited. A fragile flame, but one they could nurture into a blaze if given the chance. As they made their way through the corridors, Calum couldn't help but reflect on the audacity of their plan. It was a gamble, a leap into the unknown with nothing but determination and a makeshift sense of unity to guide them. But it was also a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a defiance that refused to be extinguished even in the face of cosmic adversity. Behind them, the storm raged on, a relentless force of nature that promised devastation. But for now, they had carved out a sliver of hope from the chaos, a chance to turn the tide in their favor. It wasn't much, but it was something, a beacon in the darkness, a lifeline to cling to in the storm. And as they pressed forward, Calum knew one thing for certain. They would fight, they would endure, and they would find a way to survive. Together, or not at all. The corridors of the Aurorium seemed narrower with the weight of cosmic chaos hanging over them, like trying to walk through a collapsing lung. Calum led the way, his mind a frantic calculator of risks and probabilities. The storm wasn't just outside. It was in his head, a tempest of doubts and hopes clashing with the intensity of a bar fight on free drink night. Eyeball, Calum barked, glancing at the hologram that floated alongside, like an annoying ghost with a penchant for unsolicited opinions. How's that distraction playing on the God channel? Eyeball's irises spun lazily, a cosmic parody of boredom. The divine broadcasters are certainly perturbed. Their focus is wavering. Translation: they're as confused as a cat in a dog show, Kira interjected, her footsteps echoing with determination, and probably a touch of impending doom. Good. Maybe they'll trip over their own cosmic robes. As they moved through the dimly lit passageways, Lynn fiddled with a set of wires she'd yanked from a control panel. She always looked like she was one bad mood away from frying someone's circuits, and today was no exception. If we keep this up, they'll be too busy scratching their celestial heads to notice us making a run for it. Here's hoping, Calum muttered, though hope was a currency he had little of. Let's just make sure we don't outsmart ourselves, Doctor. Astrus's voice crackled through their comms again, a lifeline of sanity in the midst of cosmic absurdity. The disruption's holding, but you need to get to the core of the Dyson sphere. That's our best shot at cutting their control completely. Great, the core, Calum said, rolling his eyes so hard he might have seen his own brain. Because it's not like that's the most well-guarded part of this death trap. Kira snorted. Oh, come on, where's your sense of adventure? It's not a proper life-threatening scenario until we're all down a rabbit hole with no map. Lynn wove the wires into a makeshift device, her fingers a blur. If we're lucky, we won't have to fight off anything more lethal than malfunctioning doors. Lucky's not in our vocabulary, Calum replied, checking his data pad for routes to the core. But stubborn is. Let's move. Their path took them through the bowels of the Dyson sphere, past conduits that hummed with an energy that promised both salvation and annihilation. The air was thick with the smell of hot metal and desperation, a combination as familiar as it was unsettling. They passed a control room, its monitors flickering in what could only be described as a technological seizure. Calum paused, a thought striking him like a bolt from the blue or maybe just plain desperation. Eyeball, can you jam their communications, make them think the whole system's glitching out? Eyeball's irises spun with what might have been approval. I can indeed introduce a few disturbances. Consider it a cosmic hiccup. Great, make it a belch, Calum said, a wry grin tugging at his lips. I want them to think their own tech is turned against them. Kira was already scanning the monitors, fingers flying over the controls. We'll piggyback off their comms to feed them just enough nonsense. With any luck, the gods will think their own creations have developed a mind of their own. Just what we need, Lynn chimed in, plugging her device into a terminal. A cosmic tech revolt. Can't wait to see the gods panic over that. With everything set, they moved on, the core looming nearer with every step. Calum felt the pressure of the storm both outside and within, a double-edged threat that cut deep. But this was their chance, their only shot at breaking free from the divine leash. Finally, they reached the corridor leading to the core, its massive doors sealed like the mouth of a beast. Calum eyed them with a grim determination. Kira, get those doors open. Lynn, ready the EMP. We hit them with everything we've got and hope the gods are too busy putting out cosmic fires to notice. Kira hacked the terminal with a flair that suggested she'd missed her true calling as a master thief. I'll have this open faster than a bored god on a power trip. Lynn nodded, her EMP primed and ready. Let's give them something to remember us by. As the doors slid open, the core was revealed in all its terrifying glory. Energy pulsed through conduits like the universe's own circulatory system, a heartbeat that could stop theirs in an instant. Calum took a deep breath, the reality of their situation sinking in. Here we go, folks. Time to see if we can pull off a miracle or if we're just deluding ourselves. They moved with precision, placing the EMP at key points to maximize the impact. Every second felt like an eternity, the weight of their actions pressing down like a cosmic gavel ready to deliver its verdict. All set, Lynn declared, her device flashing with readiness. We trigger this and pray the gods are too busy dealing with cosmic indigestion to notice. Kira grinned, though it was more wolf than humor. If this works, we'll go down as legends, or at least as the idiots who dared to poke the gods. Calum nodded, his resolve hardening. Let's do it. With a final command, the EMP activated, sending a ripple of energy through the core. The lights flickered, the hum of power stuttering as if in shock at the audacity of mere mortals daring to disrupt its sacred flow. The storm outside faltered, the divine grip loosening as their attention was yanked in 100 directions at once. The distraction was working, their window of opportunity cracked open just enough for them to slip through. Eyeball's holographic form flickered, its voice threaded with something akin to admiration. Congratulations, Calum. You've managed to turn the divine order into a cosmic circus. Calum couldn't help but chuckle, though it was tinged with relief. Just doing our part to keep the universe interesting. As the chaos unfolded, they made their retreat, their mission accomplished, or as close to it as reality allowed. The storm's fury had dulled, the gods' focus shattered by their own machinations. It was a victory, albeit a fragile one, a testament to human ingenuity and sheer bloody-mindedness. Back through the corridors they ran, the path to freedom opening like a reluctant flower. The Dyson sphere was a maze, but now it was their maze, the gods' control slipping as humans seized the reins. They burst into the open, the storm's remnants swirling like the last dregs of a forgotten wrath. Aurorium was in their sights, a haven from the chaos, a sanctuary for their weary souls. We made it, Kira breathed, disbelief warring with triumph. We actually made it. Lynn laughed, the sound bright and defiant. Guess the gods won't be putting us on their Christmas card list. Calum allowed himself a moment of pride, though the future remained as uncertain as a cosmic lottery. Let them try. We've outsmarted them once, and if they want a rematch, we'll be ready. As they stood there, the remnants of the storm a distant whisper, Calum realized something profound. They had faced the gods and lived to tell the tale. They had defied the divine, not with weapons or power, but with wit, courage, and a refusal to kneel. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The Dyson sphere was gradually coming back to life, like a drunk waking up after a bender, unsure of where it was or why it staggered into its own reflection. Calum stood on a makeshift observation deck, the reinforced glass barely holding back the cosmic chaos that had yet to fully dissipate. The storm was winding down, its fury reduced to the cosmic equivalent of a hangover. "Congratulations," Eyeball said, flickering into view with its usual smugness. "You've successfully annoyed the gods and lived to brag about it." Calum smirked. "Bragging rights are all we get out of this, it seems, and maybe a little bit of life extension. Can't forget that bit." Kira leaned against the wall, her face a blend of relief and leftover adrenaline. "I don't think the gods will be sending us any thank you notes. Maybe a cosmic eviction notice, though." Lynn laughed, her eyes still darting over the devices she'd rigged. "They've got a new appreciation for humanity. Or, a new list of grievances." Calum couldn't help but chuckle, a dry sound that felt like cracked glass in his throat. "At this point, I'm happy with grievances. Means we're still on their radar, even if it's for the wrong reasons." The science hall was less chaotic now, its corridors humming with the kind of energy reserved for hangover breakfasts where everyone pretends things didn't go off the rails the night before. Scientists and staff were beginning to pick up the pieces, salvaging what they could from the pandemonium. Dr. Leora Asteris emerged from the lab, looking a bit worse for wear but with an unmistakable glint of triumph in her eyes. "Not bad for a bunch of mortals with a death wish," she said, nodding at Calum. "Death wish was an elective in my school," Calum replied, "but I majored in not dying just yet." Kira smirked. "Well, you've certainly earned your credits. And a diploma from the School of Cosmic Chaos." Lynn waved a hand, her fingers still stained with grease and whatever the hell else was in those wires. "I demand a parade, or at least some coffee that doesn't taste like Starship fuel." Dr. Asteris shook her head, the soft clicking of her data pad echoing in the quiet room. "We've still got work to do. The Dyson sphere's not going to fix itself, unless the gods have a maintenance department we don't know about." Calum snorted. "If they did, it'd be the most overworked and underpaid department in the universe, right next to the Department of Cosmic Irony." Eyeball flickered, its holographic form barely holding together. "Speaking of irony, you've inadvertently given humanity a chance at survival. How does it feel to be the accidental hero?" "Like I need a damn nap," Calum replied, rubbing at his temples. "But I suppose saving the universe, or at least our corner of it, is a good enough reason to stay awake." As they moved through the corridors, Calum couldn't help but notice the subtle shifts in the people around him. There was a newfound energy, an undercurrent of hope that hadn't been there before. It was as if they'd all collectively realized that maybe, just maybe, they weren't as insignificant as the gods like to think. "What's the plan now, fearless leader?" Kira asked, her tone a mix of sarcasm and genuine inquiry. Calum paused, considering the weight of that question. "We rebuild, we prepare, and we make sure the next time the gods decide to throw a tantrum, we're ready. Because let's face it, they're not going anywhere and neither are we." Lynn nodded, her eyes alight with a steely determination. "I'll start working on some upgrades, maybe a way to make our tech a little less explode why." "Always with the ambition," Calum said, smiling despite himself. "But this time let's aim for less catastrophic malfunctions. I'm tired of playing guess which button ends the world." Dr. Astra stepped up, her expression one of professionalism tempered with relief. "We've got our work cut out for us, but at least we've proven we can hold our own. That's worth something." "Yeah," Calum agreed, his gaze drifting back to the observation deck where the storm was little more than a distant rumble. "We might be ants compared to their gods, but even ants can ruin a picnic." Eyeball's form shimmered, its gaze fixed on Calum. "You've certainly given them something to chew over. I doubt they expected this kind of resistance." "Well, they should have read the memo," Kira said. "Humans don't kneel, remember." As they continued their journey through the Dyson sphere, the sense of purpose among them was palpable, like the calm after a storm where everyone silently promises themselves they'll do better next time. And maybe they would. Hope was a tricky thing, and it had a habit of sneaking in even when you tried to slam the door in its face. The core, now somewhat stabilized, hummed with energy. Not that angry, destructive kind, but a more subdued, controlled power. It was as if the sphere itself was catching its breath, recovering from the cosmic brawl it had just survived. They reached a control room, its monitors glowing with a gentle luminescence that suggested, against all odds, things might just return to some semblance of normal. Or as normal as anything got when you were dealing with divine overlords who considered humanity their favorite pastime. Calum leaned against a console, the weight of the universe, figuratively at least, settling on his shoulders. So, we've pissed off a bunch of cosmic entities and turned their toy into our playground. What's next? Kira shrugged, a faint smile playing on her lips. We keep going. We build, we learn, and we make sure the next time they show up, we're ready to give them another headache. Lynn was already tapping away at a terminal, her mind a whirlwind of ideas and innovations. And maybe we figure out a way to make this thing more than just a glorified shelter, something that can actually stand up to the gods. Ambitious, Doctor, Asterisk commented, a hint of admiration in her voice. But then ambition's what got us this far. Eyeball chimed in, its tone a blend of amusement and curiosity. What do you plan to do with all this newfound freedom? Calum paused, the question hanging in the air like a challenge. We use it. To live, to fight, to build a future where we're not just waiting for the next divine slapdown. The room fell silent, the weight of their shared resolve anchoring them all. It was a heavy burden, but one they were willing to carry, because they'd faced the gods and lived to tell the tale. They'd taken the universe's best shot and were still standing, bruised but unbroken. Seems like you've got a plan, Kira said, her voice steady and sure. Calum nodded, his mind already racing ahead, sketching out possibilities in the aftermath of chaos. It's a work in progress, but then so are we. As they turned to leave the control room, Calum felt a strange sensation, like the universe was holding its breath, waiting to see what they'd do next. And for the first time in a long time, he felt ready to meet it head-on. They had survived the storm, had turned the tide in their favor, and now it was time to forge a path forward. Outside, the remnants of the cosmic storm continued to fade, the energy dissipating into the vastness of space. It was a reminder of what they'd faced, and a warning of what still lurked beyond the stars. But for now, they had time. Time to rebuild, to prepare, and to ensure that when the gods returned, they'd find humanity ready and waiting, with a few new tricks up their sleeves. Onward and upward then, Calum said, a sense of finality in his tone. And with that, they stepped out into the unknown, ready to face whatever the universe had in store. Because they were human, and no matter what the gods thought, they weren't going anywhere. Not without a fight.